Hello, everyone, and welcome to an Errata for Session 6. And this will be dealing with both UVs and matching unity tangents. Now, basically what this Errata is all about is just that. An issue with UVs and an issue with tangents that were not readily apparent based off of the textures that we were using. Would you agree with that, Lee?
Yes, it was actually problems that I didn't even realize were problems until I started messing with another R&D session that I've been working with.
Well, you can go ahead and talk a little bit about that one. It's where you're dealing with a much larger scale terrain.
Yeah, a lot of you that have been following the R&D work in progress thread on the website, I had posted up a couple of screenshots where I had extended the terrain out to the horizon and then beyond. So I got it to the point where we could smoothly transition the camera from the ground pretty much up to the edge of space and see the curvature of the planet, or I guess it would be a moon in our case for Alethea. So, but I wanted to play around with some ideas that I had because Jason really likes the idea of flying.
Well, I mean, who doesn't?
Well,
Come on.
it's true, but we could cop out and do the World of Warcraft where you're at a fixed altitude on flight paths.
Yeah, but who likes
invisible?
Yeah, but who likes invisible ceilings? Come on.
Yeah, so we're going to. Well, we'll still have an invisible ceiling. It's just it happens to be at the edge of the stratosphere in our case.
Right.
So it's like you'll be given a warning. If you go any higher, you're going to die. So because there's no oxygen up here. So,
but when you were setting that up, when you were playing with that R&D session, you ran into an interesting problem, right?
Yeah, well, actually, it was several problems that cascaded on top of each other, which made the initial problem quite difficult to solve. That problem being that I had to import some mesh that I had created inside of Maya, which because I didn't want to have to create a large curved patch. And actually, I did do it procedurally just to see if I could. But it was much easier to rely on making a giant sphere inside of Maya and cutting down the pieces that I needed, bring that in and use that as the mesh that represents the far viewable horizon with the curved surface of the moon. So I did that, and I textured it up with the same texture that I had used for the procedural terrain patches. But when I was looking at it, it just didn't seem right. And it took a little bit to figure out what was going on, and I started stripping the main grass-like texture off, and I was looking at just the bump map information. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I had to mess with the scales and try to get everything lined up because the UV tiling for the imported patch and the one that was procedural was off, so I had to adjust that. But once I got everything one-to-one and laid out, I realized that the lighting wasn't coming from the same direction, wasn't behaving the same, and I couldn't find the same patterns that were on the imported patch inside of the patch that I was getting on the procedural. So I was looking for very particular patterns on one patch and trying to find that same pattern in the other patch, and I couldn't find it. It was driving me crazy. So, and then it's like, all right, let's make some test patterns so I could figure out what's going on. And I did that. And then that's when things started to fall in place. And I had realized that there were, a couple of fundamental things that I had didn't take into consideration.
Well, even before then, there's an outright bug at the moment that needs to be fixed.
Well, that one didn't pop up. That popped up after the fact because that bug doesn't exist in my R&D. That exists on the one that we did for the class. So that's a bug that we're going to have to address. And actually, FatGap had mentioned it as well to me when I was speaking with him. There's a bug that in the Session 6 set of videos where I was offsetting our positions for our vertices from left to right to get the nice zigzag pattern to be evenly dispersed around the origin.
Mm-hmm.
There's a spot where I forgot to change one of the parameters in the calculation of the UV for the that particular row of vertices. So what ends up happening is when we went over into train '06, which is session 6's version that was on the recording machine, and we tried to put the test pattern on, our test pattern was all zigzagged because we had missed that. So
Right.
that's a bug that we're going to be addressing in this set of videos as well. So we'll get that sorted out. We'll show the problems that another problem with the UVs that pops up, and then we're going to rework the way we're calculating our tangents so that they're calculated in the same way that Unity is doing them, because I had aligned my UVs in a way that made sense to match up with the layout of our terrain without taking into consideration that when you import a mesh, Unity has its own tangent calculations that it runs against that mesh if you enable it. And that is something that we can't control. But if we don't take that into consideration and we happen to have a mesh that has bump map or parallax type information that's relying on those tangents, and you will have your own procedural mesh that you're doing, it's best that you line those tangents up in the same direction so you get the right information in the right directions, which it
Right.
was something that I didn't do, and we're going to correct that at the end of this set as well.
So basically, several things that seem to have all popped up and all mixed together, it makes for a very interesting challenge as far as trying to figure out exactly what was going on to give this subtle offset feel. But that's when you were using this high frequency texture where you could specifically just point and say, "Aha! Look at that."
Right. Well, yeah, it was a cumulative effect.
Hmm.
So with all the different problems that we had all added on top of each other, you end up with a very complex problem that you're going, well, what is going on? So you go and you try to change one value. Changing one value doesn't fix it. You've got to change, I think it turned out I had to change like 9 different things to get it all working, and then trying to figure out. So it's basically change this. All right, what did that do? No, that's not it. So I kept changing one thing at a time, realizing that that wasn't working. So then I had to try changing combinations of things and sets. And then it was getting even more complicated. Then we came up with the test patterns, and that made it a lot simpler. And even then when we thought we had it all down, we go, we got it nailed. And we go in, we go, look, here it is. And it was still wrong. There was something else we still missed, and we had to go back and fix it again. So it was just a lot of back and forth adjusting it until we figured out what it was. And then, all right, we've got it. Hold on. How come ours is dimmer than theirs now? So we go, all right, let's go figure that one out. So I think all total, this small set of problems entailed including all the videos that got completely scrapped, maybe about a day's worth of work.
At least. I mean, it's been a good bit of work, but this complex problem, big thing to point out is that it was very subtle.
Right. But the thing is, in this particular case, because we're using high frequency noise at large scale, so we're
Right.
talking high frequency noise over tens of kilometers. And with the full horizon patch with the curve of the moon, you're talking a draw distance or a visible distance across of 100 kilometers. So
Hmm.
you're talking 10,000 square kilometers. So you're trying to zoom in, and I'm putting in debug code. And if you've ever tried to zoom in and look at a 1 meter long normal line and trying to find that in 10,000 square kilometers of terrain is difficult.
Yes.
So we ended up trying to solve the problem, what we've come up with and what you're going to see in the upcoming videos is a very simplified technique that we can make sure that everything's lined up, sort out the problems. And it is not something that where Jason was saying, it is subtle. It's not something that we can say, oh, it's so subtle, we're not going to worry about it.
Right.
Because the problem is it causes your lighting to be calculated incorrectly. So what that ends up being, if you were to constantly implement this type of system, you end up with the light seeming to be coming from multiple directions at the same time, casting shadows in the wrong directions on different surfaces depending on which calculation you're using for your tangents. And it's one of those things where you don't readily know what is wrong, but you can look at it and go, there's something wrong with that.
It's more of a you feel it than can just point right to it.
Yep.
But by simplifying everything, which is going to take place here in the next video, it's going to make it very easy to see what's going on. Actually, I believe in the next video we're just going to go through setup, preparing for a very simplistic demonstration.
Well, it saves hours off of the troubleshooting process.
For sure.
We're actually going to go through, we're going to set up all the pieces, parts that we need to very efficiently step through the process of fixing it, and we'll explain some of the hang-ups and what happened when we were trying to test things different ways as we go, because some of those stories are pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, especially Chewbacca. But we'll go through the steps as we line everything up. We're going to create a mesh, bring it in. We're going to create a test pattern. We're going to bring it in. And we're going to line up our procedural next to an imported and get it all ready to go. And then in a following video, we're going to break the multiple problems up into small little pieces so we can demonstrate what's going on, what our fix was, and why we had to do that.
Awesome. Well, with that, let's go ahead and bring this intro to a close and get started with the setup for this. So with that, thanks a lot, everyone. See you in the next video.